Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by Ndis Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Debbie from Ndis Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing Ndis world. Min, hello.
Hello Debbie, how are you?
Good.
So let's get a podcast out of the way before you head off overseas, your trip to, where are you going on holidays to where? Where are you going?
I'm going to Fiji in the US
Wow.
and Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody stop your inquiries until 3 more weeks when Debbie's
I'll probably be back before this is even out. But
we'll make sure it goes out quickly. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, what are we talking about today?
There was an article come out early in the week. We're in the middle of May here. From the Housing Hub, just an email came out to everyone. The article was, "A home is more than bricks and mortar." So very interesting just to go over this awesome resource or an article and cover some of the points here, and also the data about the accessible housing and support data from the Housing Hub. It'll be very good to go through as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the quarterly snapshot that the Housing Hub releases for the housing, not just SDA, but accessible housing.
Yeah. So today we're going somewhere a little bit different. Usually we talk about numbers, the yields, index pricing, categories, build costs, and all that kind of stuff. So today we want to step back a little bit from all that and ask a big question, which is, what are we actually building and who are we building it for? Because we now have this fresh data from Housing Hub from their January to March 26 quarterly snapshot, and the numbers tell a different story that backs up everything we're going to talk about today. Yeah, Debbie?
Yeah, pretty much. So, but yeah, the start of that you said was housing and homes. And this is not just an issue in the disability world. I mean, this is just in general. We're talking about housing in Australia. The housing conversation is all about how many homes, construction targets, approval times. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, and we need more dwellings on the ground. So we're always talking about housing as stock, about the numbers of properties being delivered, new lots released, and we tend to think of it in this industry as inventory, thinking of homes as inventory. But when you're talking about it from the NDIS perspective, that can be quite challenging language if you're talking to SIL providers and, far more importantly, to participants. It's not housing stock, it's their homes.
It's the housing outcome and what they need from the house itself, yeah.
Yeah, so we've really got to think about it more as homes and what those homes need to be to work. And there's still obviously a big shortage of accessible homes out there. And I guess that then comes back to this snapshot that the that the Housing Hub has put out this week, covering the data. So it really is important to understand this is Housing Hub data taken from their website, predominantly from searchers, who is searching on their website, what they're searching for. The most searched suburbs are the suburbs with the most stock. We're either using that word again, stock, but the suburbs with the most houses and whether they're meeting the demand.
So, Debbie, what kind of stats are you seeing from their report that was issued or attached to the email of this article here?
Well, I know that we've gone through these reports before, and I think the numbers that stuck out for me the most are the listings, or rather the searches for housing. So we've had 92,000 searches on Housing Hub for accessible housing and supported accommodation. And what is really important is that 75% of the searches on Housing Hub were for people wishing to live by themselves or with family. And that's I think, gone up quite considerably. I think it used to be around about 40 to 50%. For those wishing to live in their own, it's now 47.9%, 48%, and another 20% of people want to live with family. So that only leaves 25% of people wishing to share a house.
Now, we've been talking about this very point the last 4 or 5 years now. It'd be hard to find a participant who wants to live with 3, 4 other people.
Oh, yeah.
So that's just common sense. And this data shows it, because the data is saying they're searching for themselves living or their family. So
yeah. I mean, this is, every time I look at this data, it increases. Those numbers are increasing to people wanting to live on their own or with family. And that is just really significant when it comes to the supports that are being provided by the NDIS, and also the homes that are being built for people with disability. It's just not matching. The other thing that was really interesting in this data is that participants, most homes that are being built for the NDIS sector are designed with an OA room, a support room, to provide on-site supports for the participants living there. Now, we kind of assume, I guess, that most people are going to need supports and are going to need a home. But going back to the search data here on the Housing Hub, 53% of seekers want a home with no support provided. And yet only 13% of properties are not offering support. That's a really big gap there too, that is separate to whether people want to live on their own or share or live with family. There's just a real, constantly we're saying there's this mismatch between the housing that's out there and what people are looking for, but it's a mismatch on different levels.
Yeah, I got nothing to say, but yeah.
It's just, what are we doing? What are we building here? And why is this happening? I guess it's because still people with disability are not being involved in the development of these properties and in the planning.
They never have been.
They never have. And that gap is just widening because it is. Everyone thinks they know what people want, and the NDIS is providing funding based on what remember, this is an insurance scheme at the end of the day. So they're providing funding based on a whole lot of different criteria, and it comes down to them reducing their costs. And we've heard a lot about that going on, of course, over the last couple of years. But the overall thing is the NDIS are trying to limit what they're paying out, but none of that is helping participants find housing that they need and want. And choice and control just doesn't come into it anymore, really, when the properties out there just don't meet what they need.
So what more does the data report here show, Debbie?
It's showing, interestingly, the top 5 suburbs that are being searched in each state. So this is obviously where the demand is greatest. And it still just backs up the areas we know have a demand. But it's also quite interesting. And I'm not sure if that's because there is also a lot of properties in these areas. But in Victoria, the top 5 suburbs are Melbourne. I guess that would be Melbourne City, Geelong, Ballarat, Frankston and Croydon. Frankston and Croydon we know, and of course inner Melbourne we know are in high demand. Geelong has always been a high demand area, but with a lot of supply now. And the same with Ballarat. So it's interesting that they're still up there in the top 5 searches.
Can I say, Debbie, on that, that's searches. I'm going to now refer to the top 5 suburbs with the most supported accommodation vacancies, excluding SDA places. Victoria, Clyde North number 1, Tarney number 2, Cranbourne number 3, Geelong number 4, and Pakenham number 5. So again, they are prime areas where lots of land is being released for estates and lots of houses being built for normal residential house and land packages. So obviously you're going to get the investment marketers and spruikers throwing in there, sprinkling in their SIL and SDA houses in there. So that's why it's a top 5 vacancy 2 there.
Yeah, and that's for non-SDA, but we've also got the top 5 areas with SDA vacancies. Similar, we've got 2 of the 5 suburbs are the same, Tarney and Clyde North. Also Beveridge, Wyndham Vale and Armstrong Creek. So those are all areas we're well aware of that have SDA oversupply, the most vacancies.
Debbie, you're an old Sydney girl from many years ago. You've got Sydney here, you've got New South Wales, sorry. Blacktown, Rooty Hill, Ryde, Orange and Dubbo. So Orange is more of a regional thing. But
Yeah, Orange and Dubbo are
But those
regional.
top three there, Blacktown, Rooty Hill and Ryde, what's your thoughts and feedback on why those three are in the top three there for Sydney?
I really don't have an answer as to that. This is obviously excluding SDA places, Min. Blacktown, we know, has a lot of SDA participants.
And a lot of providers in those areas too.
Maybe that's why it is, because there are a lot of providers. So they've got more properties with the vacancies. SDA vacancies, Blacktown again, Marylands, Schofields, Liverpool, Penrith, which is really interesting because that's where we know a lot of apartments have been built. But yet, the most searches, again, Penrith, Liverpool, show up there, Campbelltown, Newcastle, an area we know has a significant undersupply, and Sydney itself. So I'm not sure when it's talking about Sydney. In all of these states, it's got the city as the top search, but it doesn't specify. I guess it's talking about Sydney City, maybe. So, no real surprises there. SDA vacancies in those areas that I mentioned, Blacktown, Maryland, Schofields, Liverpool, Penrith, probably because they are mainly in apartments. And whilst we know that those apartments are getting filled slowly, the demand is still in those areas, but not for houses, not for apartments. People want houses or villas. They want to live in a house with a backyard. They don't want to live in a high-rise apartment. And apartments are great for SDA for some participants, but it doesn't suit everyone. And we've known this from the start, that we need more houses built.
Good luck doing that in $2 million suburbs.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they're not there. So, these snapshots from the Housing Hub always have some interesting data. It reiterates how many SDA participants there are, how many places there are. That's also straight off the NDIA data. 25,500 participants with funding. There's almost 30,000 enrolled places. Remember, a lot of those include places in the group homes and legacy properties. So realistically, we've probably got about 15 to 20,000 places in new build. So those seeming oversupplies always need to be taken with a pinch of salt and looked at a more granular level. But I guess the other thing we haven't touched on is the categories that people are searching for, and the categories of properties for SDA that are being listed. And we've got the most properties listed for rent, HPS, but that actually matches the number of people searching, not the highest, but 28% of people are searching for HPS and there's 32% of properties. FA goes the other way. We've got 24% of properties listed as FA and 30% of people are searching. But those two types of dwellings are pretty much interchangeable in the bigger scheme of things. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean someone is going to want to live in a HPS if they are FA and we don't get many FA properties. Most of them are certified for both. Robust is probably the biggest difference. We've only got 6.6% of listings are for robust, and yet we've got 17% of searches. So as always, apart from certain little areas around Australia where there has been an oversupply of robust homes built, we need more robust than anything else.
Oh, we've been saying it for years, Debbie.
Yeah.
Nothing new there.
Yeah, exactly. So interestingly enough, we spoke on another recent episode about there being something like 45% or 48% vacancies across the country.
In places?
In places. Now, on the Housing Hub itself, this is obviously on vacancies listed on Housing Hub. The estimated vacancy rate is 24%. But I guess that's just a matter of the fact that many properties out there that are enrolled are not being listed on Housing Hub at the moment. So again, this is only a partial picture because it is Housing Hub data. But again, it is is very relevant, because this is where the majority of properties are listed, and it's where most seekers are going to look.
And if you're a property owner not attached to an SDA provider, who is not a paid subscriber of the Housing Hub, then that kind of misalignment of empty stock is not available, reflected on the platform.
Yeah, because you have to be a registered NDIS provider to be able to list on Housing Hub. So, well, that's pretty much the data that's backing up this situation with the housing in Australia for people with disability. Again,
I do want to say, Debbie, like you say the word data, I want to say the distorted data.
Yes.
Because surprisingly, but not surprising, this distorted data or information that we see here in front of us is what happens when the sector forgets the first principle, which is when we build to a category instead of to a person. Then there's the error right there, and that's why we, as in people who have interest in the NDIS housing world, you got to keep in the forefront of your mind the lived outcomes concept. Okay, it's a measure of how well or how poorly the matching of housing options and participants is working. As you said earlier, Debbie, 2/3 of seekers are unsatisfied. 53% of participants want no support. 40% are very unsatisfied with where they currently live. So that's the market not doing its job, if you're a participant or a family member or a provider or an investor listening to this podcast episode, then that's the question that carry into your next decision or thought-making process. Not what got built, but who is it for and whether it works for the life that they want to lead, these participants, Any final words, Debbie?
Look, it's a challenging area to be trying to develop the right kind of housing for people with disability in Australia. We're learning a lot. We've learned a hell of a lot over the last 10 years, but there's still a big way to go, obviously.
All good. Thank you so much, Debbie. Bye-bye. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.